only story that I was given was that there was this period of foreign occupation that ended in 1492, and so that Spain could throw off its foreign shackles and rise and become a great world power. Now, I must say that my daughters, who are, one is in, believe it or not, as old as I am, in the 5th grade, another one is in college, and another is out on her own. They've been given a somewhat different narrative, a broader one, a deeper one that's more inclusive. But this is what I was taught when I was that age, that it wasn't there. It was something unpleasant, and it's gone. If we're going to address these ongoing squabbles, fights, and so-called debates, we're going to have to deepen and broaden the informational and factual, the body of facts that people work from. Otherwise, it's just going to be an unending argument that no one will win. My book, Lost History, was a personal effort to help Americans have a broader context than the latest news bulletin, the latest emanation from the White House or from Al-Qaeda headquarters or wherever, that there's a lot more to what's going on here than what we're being told. The book came out in 2007, and the main focus of it, the central message, I'll use a cheap gimmick here. If you had to summarize the single most important contribution of Muslim civilization to modern global civilization, it would be this, whether you hate it or love it. The intellectual component of this, aside from the chemistry and metallurgy and all that goes into it, is the mathematical basis for the transmission of huge amounts of complicated information, a form called the algorithm. Now, I thought that algorithm was a Greek word until I started digging into it. Algorithm is a Latinized form of the name of a Persian mathematician working 1,200 years ago in Baghdad. His name was Muhammad al-Khwarizmi. And I've always said that he had more impact on the lives we lead than Albert Einstein. Not that Albert Einstein wasn't brilliant, but the theory of relativity is something that I really cannot absorb and conceive of. But algebra, which is also a contribution of Mr. al-Khwarizmi, the zero, which was also discovered by the Mayas independently, and what we call the Arabic numerals, which are really come from India, through Mr. al-Khwarizmi, those things define so much of our society that I think he deserves about 12 Nobel Prizes. But he lived so long ago, intellectual property didn't exist then, and so I'm trying to do my little part to reawaken people to the multiple roots of our knowledge, not just stuff from Europe and North America, but also stuff from points farther south and east that helped the West become what it is today, and now the world. My premise is that there is no clash of civilizations, whether you be living in a cave in Tora Bora or whether you be in Burbank, California. You live in a global digital world. How you pray and talk and look and eat and sing and so on, doesn't matter. It's all defined by this, and I'd say about 50% of its intellectual foundation comes from those guys and women who need to be rediscovered, working in places like Baghdad and Cairo and Damascus and Agra and wherever, in Bukhara, in Central Asia. The things that I talk about in Lost History, I'm trying to cover so much information, so much time that I guess you could call Lost History Islam's 1001 greatest hits, to put it crudely. This was the only way I felt like I could capture all this and make it accessible to popular readers. I wanted to reach people who vote, people who watch TV and react to hot buttons that are being pressed. It's not an academic work. I wanted to take the very good work of our universities and put it in a form that would draw in a larger audience, put it in a compelling historical narrative. Whether I succeeded or not is for others to decide. I'm making some huge assertions here that a lot of academics are afraid to do because they have to earn tenure. and so that everything has to be, quadruple checked and committees and approved and so on. I don't have to do that. Why do I think this exceptional stuff happened? Part of it is because in its early centuries, the civilization of Islam had an openness that I call it improvisation. When you start out from a small desert existence in two small oases or shrine towns like Mecca and Medina were, and suddenly you find yourself ruling, 100 years after the death of the Prophet, ruling a lot of the old Roman Empire and some of the Byzantine Empire, and going right up to the gates of China and India, and you have hundreds of millions of really smart, educated, urbanized people falling under your sway. What do? Do you try and Arabize them? No, you can't do that. Although the initial Abbasid Caliphate didn't last that, it only lasted 500 years, it was successful because it and its predecessor, the Umayyad, tried to incorporate and assimilate other ways of doing things. It was kind of like what Hewlett-Packard used to say. I used to work with one of the CEOs there during their, quote, reinvention. It was keep the best and reinvent the rest. And that's what was going on in the early Muslim civilization. I also have a personal belief. I love history. I grew up in the age of hippies and in Vietnam and so on, and people say, "Hi, my name is Aspen," or "Hi, I'm, Starlight." But no one ever had a last name. They were trying to shed what they were and where they'd come from, and I always rejected that because we came from somewhere. I feel like if we ignore and bury where we've come from, we will be lost as we move forward. I'm also shocked that what is presented as hard academic information, I believe, really proceeds from cultural and religious and even ethnic prejudice. Now, the mainstream Western view of Islam, or the political Islam today, is that it's anti-democratic, xenophobic, anti-intellectual, so on and so forth. You've heard all this before. But when you look at the breadth of civilization, it isn't born out, especially of Muslim civilization, it's not borne out by fact. So I think we really need to look at the way academics and so-called experts have framed Muslim civilization, and that is a negative frame focused on its failings, which are all well known to us. Human beings, they mess up, they go wrong, they're bad apples mixed in, and so on. Imagine if we turned the same negative frame on Western civilization. Let's say that the defining points of it are the Inquisition, ongoing racism, genocides here and there, imperialism and colonialism, Nazism, which is the culmination of a lot of these things. It's sort of its moment of glory, and Stalinism. Well, it looks horrible. And there are people who look at the West that way. I mean, the Soviet Union used to beat that drum to great, especially in the developing world. Well, it's ignoring a lot of the story when you focus on the negative, and that's what I'm trying to do. I argue, and I don't have to earn tenure, that Muslims helped create the world's most progressive force for about 750 years. The key values of this force were a culture of intellect. When you go back and look at the intellectual and theological and scientific and mathematical debates that went on in Baghdad and Damascus and Cairo and wherever in Spain, it's astonishing that people use their brains so much. I don't think there's anything like that going on in our world today outside of our universities. I think the United States has the greatest universities in the world. Unfortunately, its product rarely penetrates out into the broader society. Our so-called debates are just really mindless and very superficial. But early Islam was just astonishing. It took Arab and Persian and Indian intellectual methods and then mixed in Hellenistic, and then it fused this all together, and it went on for a long, long time. It's not going on anymore, but it did happen once, and it could always come back. There was also a tradition of questioning assumptions. Ibn al-Haytham, who's the great Arab scientist, physicist, optical theorist, started out in Basra in Iraq and then defected to the Fatimid side in Cairo, said the only thing that we should take on faith as Muslims are the statements of the Prophet. Everything else is subject to testing and verification. He's the father of the modern scientific method that's always attributed to Kepler and others in the Renaissance Europe. Well, of course, Europe did fantastic things, but we've forgotten that it was being done first somewhere else. So what? You're not going to get royalties for it, but I think at least we need to be intellectually honest and say not all modern thought came from the West. It came from other places. We have to give credit where credit's due. There was a culture of invention in the Muslim world, people trying to fix things and invent things and make things that made life better, or they were often failures. They were, like all inventions, they went in different directions. But it was a value that multiple cities and nations within Islam followed. And then there's this great tradition I'm going to try and talk about tonight, the tradition of assimilating others and tolerating a diverse citizenry, a diverse tradition, diverse cultures within, and this thing that I call enlightened leadership. These are some of the key pieces of what we look at, and it's just so much, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but you know it, I think. Math, science, medicine. Medicine by itself merits a 10-hour presentation here, because Muslim medicine modernized. It took influences from Greece and Rome and India and China and wherever, but it packaged it and presented it to Europe so that it could then move on to an even higher level. One thing I talk about is that the culture implicitly and explicitly expressed what is an ideal Muslim leader. Few people ever achieved it. Many tried. Many went in totally different directions and were contrarians. But here are these values that I think that literature and holy text and tradition told leaders that they should pursue. Consulting with the governed, and this comes from Arabia, and it comes from common sense. It comes from other traditions. Being fair, being generous, not letting people starve in the gutter and be miserable, trying not to be imperial and pompous in your ways, tolerating difference, trying to be wise, whatever that means, thinking with your heart and not just your head, being learned and educated. Gosh, I mean, the Prophet just rattled that one off over and over again. If you must go to China, seek knowledge, and the ink of the scholar is holier than the martyr, and so on and so forth. Knowledge, knowledge, knowledge all the time, as well as being brave and pious. All right, let's go back. Let's look for some textual basis here. In his final sermon, the prophet is quoted as saying, "All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over black," and so on. I cannot find if you draw a line, I'm not an expert on China and so on, but this is the most explicit statement of anti-racism that I've ever seen at that time, in that time frame. This is his final farewell sermon where he's telling the followers, I don't think I'm going to be around much longer, and they're saying, oh no, you can't die, and he says, yes, I'll die, and then he dies, and a lot of people say it's impossible, he can't be dead, but he was dead. 10 years before that, when he had to retreat to Medina, to Yathrib, because